Hello and welcome back to another episode. Now, today I want to talk briefly about a comic publishing practice. A practice which I would have loved to have benefited from growing up in North Wales in the early to mid 90s, and a practice which I think is a very clever one. You see, growing up, it was really hard to get hold of American comics. It just was. Obviously the Beano and other British stuff was always readily available on shelves. But getting hold of a Spider-Man comic, or Fantastic Four, or Batman, Nightwing, all of this stuff was a nightmare, especially in a little town like Prestatyn in North Wales, because you get dribs and drabs, little bits would sort of dribble down because that month or that week the newsagent felt like ordering it in. So you might get like a Spider-Man comic one week, and then the following week, when you wanted to see what happened next in the story arc, you might get something from Fantastic Four, and it was just so frustrating. And so growing up, I kind of learned to engage with comics almost as sort of conceptual moments in a character's history or story arc. They were filled, in that sense, with facts. I know that at some point Batman fought this character or whatever. I wasn't actually engaging with the whole arc, and that really didn't actually become a possibility for me, at least, until I came across collected works, so compilations of a whole story arc, and in particular, the first one of those for me was the Nightfall saga. Now, recently, in the past couple of years, I've become aware that this has possibly been tackled here in the UK, in particular by DC Comics, with the release of compiled issues, and not stories but issues. So, for example, in this version, this comic here, you've got 3 stories, so 3 American comics, and here you've got 4 American comics. And what they're doing is they're allowing you to buy these compilations bit by bit. So this is number 52, this is number 53, and you can keep up with multiple stories at the same time in a way which is in which everyone wins. For example, these cost $3.99, which isn't that expensive for what you're getting, and actually compared to, for example, I don't know, White Dwarf magazine, which is more than £5 these days, it's pretty good. So the newsagent is willing to get in this sort of chunky 100-page special Batman's comic, which contains 4 story arcs. And at the beginning, you're given a good little sort of overview of what's in the comic, a little overview of what's happening in other comics. For example, the Harley Quinn comic, and you're encouraged basically to keep up with the story, and therefore you're actually able to as well, because the next week in comes a $3.99 publication that the UK newsagent is happy to sell. You're happy to buy it, and you can continue like that. And I actually came across these in an Oxfam bookshop, so in like a charity bookshop, going for £1 each. Actually, there's a huge stack, and I bought all the issues that contained the super heavy storyline, which seemed to which intrigued me. I saw one of the issues in that storyline, and yeah, I wanted to know more. So I purchased the whole story arc. Cost me £15, and for the ride for free, I also got other stories as well because of these compilation publications. Now, as far as I can tell, this isn't necessarily something which is happening that much in the US. For example, at the beginning of one of these says here, Batman Volume 3, Issue 53, published by Titan Magazines, which is a UK publisher from London. Compilation and all new material, copyright 2014. Originally published in the US as single magazine forms: Batman 50-51, Robin, Son of Batman 11, Batman Eternal 28-29, original US editors, blah 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 blah. So these are explicitly collecting American comics together into a format that works here in the UK, because most people, myself included, growing up, you can't get access to for example, a Forbidden Planet in a big city. Forbidden Planet, being a geek and sci-fi store, where at the back, for example, here in Newcastle, you have all these comics lining the walls, so people can actually buy individual issues. That said, that they're buying issues for prices that are around $3.99 each. So it's a good bargain for kids. Frankly, it's a good bargain for me. and crucially, it means that in the newsagents, or in the case of each newsagent, sorry, they're able to feel as though they're actually making some money on these well, not quite imports, because they're being published in the UK via Titan, and but nonetheless, you are benefiting as a reader from essentially having imported storylines. I love this notion, and in particular, I mean, I think typically they're 3 in 1, and so yeah, like I said, I've got a stack up in upstairs, because I'm currently reading the Super Heavy storyline, and I would love to have had this format commonly deployed when I was a kid, but you know, the world wasn't ready for 3 in 1 comics at that point, and so I think the closest thing I've got to this sort of thing with a nice glossy cover is when Marvel did some special editions. So for example, the first Spider-Man comic I ever bought was a special edition. It was during the Clone Saga, and it was about this thick, and it came with a nice solid glossy cover. So that was, you know, that sort of stuff in terms of the book format was around, but this idea, lumping 3 comics together, not necessarily comics that are related in terms of their stories, 3 different story arcs ongoing at the same time, it just solves that problem, because as I say, it still is quite difficult to get hold of all of these comics and to follow all the stories, and boy, I wish I was a kid now, because I'd be spending my pocket money on these. I don't know, guys, do you have any similar sort of stories, and have you ever had any similar sort of issues in terms of getting hold of comic story arcs? Did you kind of give up like I did as a kid and just sort of just be grateful for what you got? Because I think these days you don't have to. I think these days you can follow along. I think the only problem for me was when I was trying to figure out how long the Super Heavy storyline was in terms of the comics, and so you know, obviously you get a numbering, so it'll say issue 49 to 52. That's a story arc, or what I mean, 39 to 52. And unfortunately, the numbering on these is in some cases very similar, but not quite the same as the numbering on the original American comic. And so often you will find people talking about the story arc and how it unfolds using the American numbering, not being aware of these compilations here in the UK or elsewhere. So that can get a bit confusing when you're trying to track down a story, or when you're trying to, you know, sort of relate to other comic book lovers online or whatever. But that's a small price to pay. A bit of numeric confusion is a small price to pay to be able to actually do what I never could as a kid. So what a wonderful idea. Anyway, guys, as ever, until next time, do take care. Bye bye.